Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my unfaithful wife cheated on me 13 times and then decided to try and evict me from my private property. She forged documents to take away my home. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So for some context, a couple of years ago I met a woman online from another country. I know it's a tale as old as time and usually it doesn't work out, but I thought we were different. If you've ever seen 90 Day Fiancé on TLC, well, we were asked to be on it, so I guess that says a lot already. I was definitely in denial for most of the relationship. She is stunning and I'm a fairly ordinary looking man. But I was gullible, even with all my family and friends trying to convince me not to marry this woman and bring her over here. Anyway, flash forward 2 years of chatting online and FaceTiming, we met in person, she came over here. A month into the trip and we were married. Looking back on it, I cannot believe I got married so soon after meeting her in the flesh. From the very beginning we had some issues. It was like she was a different person. She knew that I would be supporting her financially and that I didn't make a great deal, so we would have to settle into a humble home. However, she ended up forcing me to take out a huge mortgage in order to get practically a mansion in the hills. Once again, I was a fool and allowed all of this 1 week into the honeymoon and she didn't come home one night. I was looking for her all night and had the cops doing a search party and everything. I was beyond scared. And well, they found her the next morning. She was walking out of a motel. My heart shattered. I saw her in her disheveled state and knew immediately what had happened in that motel. She denied it at first and then broke down and started apologizing like crazy. She was a very good actor, as I believed she was genuinely heartbroken at her own actions. I forgave her again being a fool. You will notice a bit of a pattern with that. However, a month later I noticed on her phone that she was still in contact with the guy she had originally cheated on me with. I thought this was weird and decided to snoop around a bit. It turns out they had been sending risky pictures the whole time since the first motel encounter. I confronted her once more and again came the waterworks. And again, I forgave her, as I'm sure you can imagine my trust had been broken and I became very insecure. I found myself overthinking every encounter she had with another male, even the women. It was so emotionally taxing. I brought up lots of these feelings with her, and I'll admit that I did go too far at times, accusing her of cheating, which she did not do. Our relationship was on the rocks. 13 times. By the end of our first year of marriage, that is how many times she had cheated on me. 13. I don't even know how I stayed with her after the first, let alone 5 and then 10. It could have been more. Those were just the times I confronted her and she had no way of denying it. The story begins from the 13th time. So I came home from work, the door was slightly unlocked and a stranger's car was parked out front. I opened the door and right in our lounge was my wife having intercourse on our sofa. I stood in sadness, not shock. They scrambled up, but she practically rolled her eyes at the man for being so frightened. She didn't care. "Get out," she said to me. What? I was shocked. She had never acted this way after being caught before. I said, "Get out. This is my house too. I don't want you here right now. Please leave." She waved her hand at me. "You cannot be serious. I just caught you with another man and now you're acting like I've done something wrong?" The man in question was just staring between us. "Yeah, that's messed up. I'm out," he muttered as he grabbed his clothes and headed out the door. "Now look what you have done. Leave!" She started yelling and throwing things at me, and so I quickly left. I stayed in a hotel that night. I was sure she wouldn't be able to keep that up. I also don't know if I even wanted to be home at that point with her. The next morning I went back only to find all of my belongings outside the house on the grass, scattered and somehow broken. I ran over to the door and tried to open it, but my key would not work. She had changed the locks. It was around this time that I was thinking of divorcing her. I finally had enough. So that was when I firmly knew it was over. I wondered briefly if she knew of my plans, hence her kicking me out. "This is my home. Get your stuff and go," she yelled from the window. I stayed silent, loaded up my car and drove straight to my lawyer's office. I explained everything and he rightly pointed out that the house was in my name and there was no way she could just claim it for herself, and given that I wanted a divorce, no relationship harm could be done. I should just call the police. So that's exactly what I did when I went back to my house. "I have called the police," I yelled up at the window she was leaning out of. She slammed the window shut and I heard footsteps running down the stairs. Suddenly she was at the door and before I knew what was happening, she had slammed her head against the wall. "What the heck?" I exclaimed, rushing over to her, which was a mistake as that is when the cops showed up. "Officer, help me! Look at what he did!" she cried out. I was immediately restrained and it took ages before they released me. I had to guide them into my pocket for my phone to then pull up the security camera that would have captured the whole ordeal. They released me and my wife looked pale. She knew this would not work out in her favor now. "Is this your house, ma'am?" one officer asked. "Yes, it is, here." She shoved some documents into his hands. I raised my eyebrow in confusion. "He gave me this house as a wedding gift, see." "Ma'am, these are clearly fake and the ones you have printed out are not even for this state." The officer looked at her in bemusement. She started kicking up a fuss, screaming about how unfair it all was and claiming she deserved the home. "It's just, you don't..." She was a whimpering mess. "Say no more, sir." An officer looked at me. "Get a lawyer." The officers drove off and I left my wife on the porch to head back to my lawyer. We spent the next couple of hours drafting up divorce papers. We did not sign a prenup, which was what scared me, but my lawyer had plans. After she was served the papers, we went to court. I did not want her getting a dime. "You forged legal documents and faked a domestic assault, is this correct?" the judge asked her. My wife looked like she wanted to say something before the judge cut her off. "I have the proof on the officer's body cams. Both of these are criminal charges. This already is not going to go well for you. Do you really wish to fight for your prenup rights?" Yes, I do." She smirked at me as if she had already won the case. "Now, as for evicting your husband from his own home, the grounds for divorce are as clear as day. With that, along with the two things I've just listed, you'll be getting nothing in the divorce. Is that clear?" the judge stated. "But," she began. I felt like I had a frog in my throat as I looked over to my wife, who had brought out the waterworks again. Yes, I was nervous as hell. I don't even know how to this day. I sued her. I got a hefty sum of money from her. I knew she had savings from her parents. I didn't feel bad. The things she had done to me accounted for a much bigger punishment than she was getting. Now here is the biggie. Because the marriage is now invalid and it had not lasted 3 years, she has no grounds to legally stay in the country. She got deported. "No, that's so unfair, illegal, he should be deported," she screamed and kicked, real tears this time. My wife ended up being dragged out of the courthouse by the police, begging and screaming, kicking and crying, but it was no use. Revenge had been served and I could not have been happier. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed the relationship stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is a petty revenge story. I moved in to see my new house a few years ago. The people living right beside my house are a bunch of two-faced, envious cowards. Everything I added to my house that they saw, they would try to one-up on me. Garden, lighting, gazebo, even my washer and dryer. Every time I get something new, they would get something similar the very next week. Well, I got a bit of extra income last year and bought myself my dream car. It was expensive but worth it. The neighbors could not match it. Instead though, they punctured one of its tires. How do I know? I overheard them talking about it, so I checked my CCTV footage. And well, one of them crawled under the gate of my property and nail-gunned one of my car's tires. I saved the footage, but blood went to my head. I decided to get back at them. They have a dirt road for a driveway and they own a food catering business. I soaked a bunch of nails in Coca-Cola and then brake fluid to make them rust in a short time. I then scattered them all over their driveway and watched as their delivery vehicles go up and down the road. All their vehicles' tires were punctured by multiple nails per tire and their business was interrupted. At the same time, I reported them to the cops with the footage I saved. They were charged with malicious destruction of property. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. I walked into a gas station, we will call it Square L, about 7:30 AM. Locally, that's 30 minutes after they start selling alcohol. The county is dry between 3 and 7 AM. Grab 2 of the largest packs of cheap beer they sell and head up to the register. No big deal, just stocking up for a small study party with friends on campus later that day. The person behind the register eyes me suspiciously as I set them on the counter and tells me that I'm not buying them. I politely explain it's after 7 AM and I don't see a problem. The manager, denoted by dress, t-shirt instead of polo, leans over and tells her to get my ID, so she asks me for it. I'm like, fine, whatever, and I fidget around a minute before realizing it's in my car. I say as much and offer to grab it, and she told me to go ahead. I dash out to my car, grab my wallet from my book bag, no big deal. Walk back in and present it to the person at the register, who promptly glances at it, snickers, snaps it in half, tosses it in the trash and tells me to get the F out of her store. I stood there a minute, sort of dumbfounded. The manager tells me to get the F out of the store or police will be called and someone is getting arrested. I mumbled something along the lines of the "oh crap" and opted to comply with the second half. I went to my car, grabbed my phone, called non-emergency and told them I just had my driver's license taken and destroyed. Read off the address, ended my call, and then headed back inside and stood. The manager tells me that's it, they are calling the police. I let her know I already did so. The clerk laughs and shouts for the people in the store to hear, "Y'all wanna stick around? This punk idiot called the cops on us for taking their fake ID." It took about 10 minutes, but they showed up. As they arrived, the manager rushed out the door and I walked behind. The cop asked for me immediately by name, dismissing the manager pointing at me and rattling off about my fake ID. I told him what happened and I was told to leave or cops were to be called and someone were to be arrested. He then takes the statement from the manager, then the clerk, and then requests the ID to be retrieved from the trash. He looks it over and hands the two pieces back to me. He has not said anything other than simple requests for info up to this point and then asks me to come along. And we are going to have a chat outside. At this point I'm actually growing a bit concerned. He punches in the DL number and up pops my face and info. Clean history, both driving and criminal. He then lets me know that destruction of a license is a misdemeanor in this state and asks which one snapped it. We have a brief conversation and at this point he is smiling ear to ear. He asks me if I want to press charges and at this point I've already missed first class, so stating I do. I'm told to play along with him and we share course of action. By this time there were 4 squad cars and police milling about. Customers had grown scared. We walked back in, I'm staring at the floor looking pensive and he says loudly, "What do we say?" and nudges me. I politely say, "I'm very sorry this happened and I'm sure it won't happen again." The clerk and manager begin chuckling. I then finish with, "The manager requested the clerk take it who snapped it and then the manager is the one who said someone is getting arrested." The officer undid the cuffs from his belt, walked up to the clerk and began with Miranda rights. Another did the same to the manager. Another 30 minutes roll by while they are sitting in the back of the squad cars. The store is devoid of employees until someone walks out from the back cooler. I wait patiently, eventually they are cut loose under own recognizance and I'm given a date to play witness in court. We head back in and the manager is irate. The employee on release bolted. I pay for my now warm beer and then leave. My professor got a great laugh out of the police report and let me do my project presentation late anyway. Edit, update, as for the court date, one of them pushed it further, so it turned into 2 dates. As the witness I showed up but was not really needed. The first pled no contest to a charge for destruction of state property, got 6 months probation and 1,000 hours of community service. As well as having to write me an apology. The other one ended up pleading guilty to an obstruction charge and got 6 months probation only. Neither ended up going to jail and only wore bracelets for the 30 minutes or so in the car. Sorry, it's a bit anticlimactic, but I felt justice had been served. For those who say 1,000 is not possible, it started as probation and 100 hours for the first person who pled no contest. They spoke out against the judge, he upped it to 200, then 500 and then 1,000. The kid kept mouthing off, but the judge at that point told the bailiff to remove them. That was the clerk, and I remember there was a string of other offenses on their record. The manager had only a previous possession charge, but on his date acted humble and polite in court. The total opposite of how they had acted in the store with the cops. Edit number 4, I never did get the apology letter. If it was written and turned in, I have no idea where it went. Edit 5, for perspective on how this county does things, I myself received 200 hours and 6 months probation for getting caught stealing a pack of cigarettes when I was 19. We were all young and dumb once and they didn't use to hide behind the registers everywhere, which I served in about 50 hours picking up trash and then the guy signed off on the whole time. So I doubt they would have to actually serve the whole thing. And yeah, ripe stars, that actually kind of surprises me in this case that there aren't any bigger and more serious consequences for these guys. It seems if you destroy an identity document of someone, there should be severe consequences for you. Anyway, the next one is a coworker story. So I, 28 female, have been working at this small software company for about 3 years now and I genuinely love my job. I have great coworkers and the work environment is generally positive. However, there's this one coworker, let's call her Sarah, 32 female, who has been increasingly crossing boundaries. A bit of background, Sarah joined the company around a year ago and we were initially friendly. We would have lunch together occasionally and chat about random things. I didn't think much of it and it seemed like a normal office friendship. However, over time I noticed that Sarah had started to use my belongings without asking for permission. For example, she would take my stapler, pens or even my phone charger without asking. At first I brushed it off as her just being forgetful and not realizing that these were my personal items. I tried to be understanding and not let it bother me, but then things started to escalate. One day I brought in a special lunch I had prepared as a treat for myself. It was a dish that my grandma used to make for me and it had a lot of sentimental value. I had placed it in the fridge with a note clearly stating it was mine. When lunchtime came around, I discovered that Sarah had taken and eaten my lunch. I confronted her and she apologized, claiming that she thought it was meant for the whole office to share. I didn't buy it, but I let it go to avoid causing a scene. Over the next few months, Sarah's behavior continued to worsen. She began using my personal laptop without asking, even though we all have our own work computers. She would also use my coffee mug and other personal items despite me having my name on them. I tried to address it politely and asked her to stop, but she would just laugh it off and say that she didn't mean any harm. Finally, I reached my breaking point last week. I had bought a new, expensive pair of headphones to use at work and I had left them on my desk overnight. When I arrived the next day, I found Sarah using them at her desk. I was furious and asked her to hand them over immediately. She tried to play it off as a joke, but I had enough. I told her that it was not funny and that she needed to stop using my personal belongings without permission. I said it was disrespectful and a violation of my privacy. The rest of the office heard the commotion and some of my coworkers agreed with me, while others said that I was overreacting and I should let it go. Sarah has not spoken to me since and the atmosphere has become tense. A few coworkers have even suggested that I owe Sarah an apology for embarrassing her in front of everyone. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for telling my coworker to stop using my personal belongings? And yeah, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Comment number 1, not the a-hole, speak to your manager and or HR. The stapler and even the charger are kind of reasonable, but the lunch, your personal laptop and your headphones are completely out of order. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, and you should also escalate it to your manager to let them know it happened and see if they think it should be escalated further. Someone who cannot be trusted to accept personal boundaries and does not take their coworkers seriously is a liability. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this.
With the fun of summer basically at a close, I wanna tell you all a story that happened when it was still warm and sunny. A little bit about me first though, I promise it's important to the story a little bit later. I was in the Air Force for many years and honestly, I was the kind of guy that some people refer to as a lifer. Meaning that I loved my job and was going to do it for my entire life. That got cut short though when some things happened on the last tour, which was meant to be simple evacuations. We got caught in some trouble and I got hurt badly. The medical system over there is not like going to a hospital here, so they were not able to save my leg. I had to retire and learn how to use a prosthetic. I am a guy that does not do anything half-assed though, and after many years of practice can walk on it seemingly perfectly. I wanted to do something really nice with my wife and we decided to go on a little boat tour. It's kind of like a cruise, but it only lasts a day and it's mostly to see sights from the water instead of docking or being out on the ocean. It was really nice though and we got served a lunch and there is even a bar on the boat. Of course, the good always has to come with the bad and that meant there was a woman that seemed to complain about every single thing. I have no idea what her name is, but based on her behavior, I'm going to call her Karen. I assume everybody here is familiar with knowing what that entails at this point. At the lunch portion, she complained about the food and she was upset the boat could not randomly stop because some places of the water looked good and she wanted to go in and shop. I have no idea why she would even think that was possible. We did our best to ignore and avoid her because I wanted to have a good time. For almost the entire trip, we did and did not let the things we heard Karen saying in the background bother us. It was not until we started talking to another couple about jobs and me talking about how I lost my leg in the Air Force that Karen seemed to come out of nowhere. Karen, oh please, you probably just want people to feel bad for you with that story. Me, excuse me? Karen, you heard what I said. I know what people in the military look like, and they are not string beans like you. Well, not every person that serves is a huge marine like you see in the movies. Plus, it's been over a decade, so give me a break, lady. Wife, why don't you do everybody on this boat a favor and mind your own business for once? You have not shut your mouth yet, and some of us are trying to have a nice day. Karen, oh yes, it must be so nice for you to benefit from your husband's lies. If he actually didn't have a leg, he wouldn't be able to walk like that. Everybody knows that if you have a fake leg, it means you limp. You could not even bother to do your research. I did not want to start a fight with Karen, especially since I knew she had been drinking. I was never going to see this woman again in my life anyway, and we had about an hour before the ride was over. I just tried to ignore her and changed the subject to the guy I was talking to until she walked out of earshot. He was amazed at how crazy she seemed, and my wife looked ready to pounce on her. My wife does not get upset by too many things, but people messing with me is one thing that she just cannot stand. She also served and knows how badly injured vets get treated. I pointed out something and we started looking at that and thought we were done with Karen. The guy was curious about my leg and I really don't mind, so I pulled up my pants to show him my prosthetic. If you don't know that they are doing amazing things with them and they sometimes look very realistic. Still, you can usually tell it's a fake leg just by seeing it. Once again, Karen ran over, and since this story is getting a little long, I'm just gonna summarize what she said. She said that she knew I did not have a prosthetic and admitted to thinking that all of them were just metal and basically looked like a robot leg. We were also sitting on chairs at this point, which is important to note. We questioned what she thought it was, since it clearly was not an actual leg. That was when she said the thing that was the dumbest thing I have ever heard somebody say about a fake limb. She said it was just a plastic molding that I put my real leg into to trick people into thinking I was disabled. I could not help but laugh at her, so I was distracted while she went in to prove that she was right. She ripped off my leg and threw it right into the river. She had a smug grin and then looked to see that I did in fact not have a leg. I expected an apology, but looking back though, I don't know why I thought I would get one. Instead, she started blaming me somehow, and it was my fault she ended up doing it, acting like I tricked her or something when I never lied to her. The captain saw the entire thing, and I don't blame him for not knowing what to do. He made a comment before we left not to throw trash into the river, but he did not know how to handle somebody throwing an entire leg into the water. I was staying calm and just asked if he could radio to have police waiting when we docked in about 15 minutes later. When we docked, the police were waiting, and before Karen could get off, they stopped her and made everybody stay until they found out what happened. She tried to deny, saying that what she threw was a prop leg, but I had a ton of other witnesses. What she did was classified as destruction of property, since there was no way to get it back, and even if it did, the chip inside would be destroyed. I, of course, was going to sue her to pay for a replacement, and I could not wait to see her face when she knew how much my leg was going to be. It took a while to get the quote back from the insurance, but since I had only gotten that leg a year ago, they were not going to cover for the same one. It was going to cost $5,000 out of pocket for it. Karen was speechless when she found that out, and part of me hoped she did not have the money and might have gone to jail. A payment plan was worked out though, and I was able to get the replacement leg without issue. Going backwards to that day though, the police did arrest her. However, not for what you might think though, dumping in that river was a felony, and that was the reason she was arrested. Sadly, since that incident did not directly involve me, I have no idea what came of that and if she got a fine or something more serious. I can only hope that the fish in the river will enjoy their very expensive human limb and can find a use for it. All joking aside, I was mad at what Karen did and assuming that since she could not see a disability the way she thinks it is, then it must not exist. Disability comes in all shapes and sizes. Some are visible and some are not. The most important message I want to tell people though is that not all prosthetics look the same. And please don't throw them in rivers because they are very expensive. You might also end up in jail because of it, so if you're a Karen reading this, just don't do it. Who am I kidding? Obviously, no Karen would read this or learn from it, so instead just enjoy the entertainment value.
And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.